Welcome to Leadership and Culture in Healthcare. We are on to our series where I am in discussion with fabulous leaders in local government, understanding what local government does and its interaction with the NHS. And I'm delighted that I have Alison McKenzie-Folan, the esteemed OBE of Wigan Council. Alison, welcome to the podcast. Tell everybody a little bit about yourself, what you do, and maybe something about the council if they are not au fait with Wigan.
Oh, thank you so much, Matthew, for inviting me onto this podcast. I'm delighted to be able to join the conversation today. So, I'm Chief Executive here at Wigan Council. I'm also the place-based lead for health and care integration for Wigan Borough. And I've been in Wigan for 16 years now. Made my way through various different roles and ended up in the Chief Executive role about 5 years ago. For those who don't know Wigan that great, we're actually the 9th largest metropolitan council in England, so we're quite a big council. We've got 340,000 residents up in the northwest, part of the Greater Manchester Combined Authority. And probably people do know that as a combined authority, it's seen and recognised as probably the leading combined authority in terms of devolved powers. West Midlands and others not far behind, but we've had our devolution going on for quite some time. So part of that Greater Manchester family, but also for Wigan, we're also part of the Northwest. So we sort of look over to Merseyside, Cheshire, Lancashire. We're a very stable political council. As I say, serving 340,000 residents, a big borough, 70 square miles, big mining legacy and history, but amazing community assets and so much going on. And great, strong partnerships, particularly with NHS colleagues. So my role as place-based leader sort of spans across the two sectors, which is fascinating and sometimes quite hard work.
Well, we'll dig into that in a second. But so let's just talk about local authorities, because we're recording this in the week that there's been a fairly monumentous, I think it's white paper at the moment, but it's a bill going through Parliament about devolution. And as you say, you've already got a mayor, you're a unitary authority, which means that you've got all the responsibilities for local government, unlike in other areas where it's split between maybe a county council and a district. How does it work in an area that's already doing this, that your responsibilities and your council responsibilities differentiate or interlock with the mayoral responsibilities? Because I guess when I read the things from central government, there was definitely a push for even more responsibilities into the mayor. And whilst the mayor is elected, local people probably recognise more your council leader, I guess, as their local leader, don't they? So how does that kind of work, Alison, in your perspective?
I think we've been really lucky, Matthew, in Greater Manchester, because people will know we've had a long history of collaborative working. Before the Combined Authority, we were the Association of Greater Manchester Authorities. So, we've got 20, 30, 40 years of collaboration, compromise, working together as 10 local authorities. So I think for us, we're quite far ahead on the journey. And the mayor, Andy Burnham, has been the mayor for quite some time. He's been returned by, I think, every ward in Greater Manchester, bar one. So across the 10 local authorities. So that political stability with the mayor working with the leaders, I think, is a real asset to Greater Manchester. That trust that they're able to build between the leaders and the mayor, I think, has been something we'd have for some time. I think the other thing to say is that I think the positions are really clear between the mayor and the leader here. So you do get that ability to have that relationship rather than tension. And that's because the mayor is really cognizant of where his responsibilities lie and the fact that to do most of the things that we need to do across Greater Manchester and the region, it has to be done through the leaders. So you have to take each other with it. So it isn't about sort of centralisation at a Greater Manchester level. It is really about devolving to leaders at a local level. So you do get that trust and that build-up of a relationship. I think in terms of devolution, I think perhaps one of the concerns is that because we've come so far in Greater Manchester, we don't want to now wait for others to catch up. So we need to have an ear to government. We need government to listen to us, because what we want to do is push harder on areas that perhaps we still want devolution on. So we've been having lots of conversations, particularly on the skills agenda, particularly around sort of education, and in some respects a lot around the link up between health and social care. So trying to understand actually, the wider determinants of health can only be resolved by having that collaboration between the local government and NHS, and actually wider public services. So we're doing a big piece of work on a prevention demonstrator, and that prevention demonstrator is actually around showing how we can come together as partners in a system to prevent people going into hospital, to get people into economic activity, get people into jobs, and to really support their health and well-being. So, yeah, it's an interesting time to say we want to push ahead. We don't want to wait for others across the country to catch up in terms of devolution. But also we have a really good, strong relationship here because it's built on, 40 years of compromise and collaboration and working together, and people understanding their roles between the mayor and the leader. So I think, we've got a good, strong foundation to build on here, Matthew.
And so just when I speak to council chief executives, I have this figure in my mind already, and 1,300 statutory responsibilities you have as a council, roughly, which is just mind-boggling. And so you've got in my mind, you've got a tough job just to fulfill that massive statutory, regulatory must-dos. And then you've just been, Alison, talking about, and we want to take a really key role in prevention. That must get very conflictual at some point, because there's resources and the allocation to do that prevention, whilst we all would want to do it, must get eroded when you're looking at those statutory responsibilities of the council and have to break even each year.
I think, Matthew, it does, but we have to do it because, you look at a place like Wigan, I don't think we're that different from many other local authorities, but we're now spending probably nearly 70% of our budget in adults and children's on, on demand pressures, and they're demand pressures that we need to do things differently on. So unless we can do the left shift, as everybody calls it, unless we can get into those wider determinants and really think about what prevention means in terms of public service reform, then those demand pressures will increase, and the ability to spend the rest of the the scarce resources that we have on the other statutory responsibilities. And I think at the last count we provided about 750 services to 340,000 residents, and if most of that money is getting spent on adults and children's, it makes it difficult to keep the environment clean, to do to do all of the other things that we have to do to make people feel safe and living happy, healthy lives in the borough. So prevention is probably the only game in town, really. We've been at it a long time in Wigan in terms of public service reform. We've been doing place-based integration work at a neighbourhood level for some time. But I think working on the prevention demonstrator gives us, I suppose, a bit more spotlight on the ability to go again on some of it and look at some of the lessons we've learned over the last few years and work together as a Greater Manchester family to say, okay, what can we do collaboratively? What do we need to do differently? How can we really use the data and intelligence to help us in terms of our neighbourhood health prevention work? So yeah, it's messy, but it's the only thing to do, really.
It's an essential, but yeah, it's just man. And tell the people that kind of aren't aware of it, the prevention demonstrator presumably is testing out some very specific interventions or approaches. Is that right in Wigan?
Well, the prevention demonstrator at the moment is a bit of a collection of things that we're trying to articulate for Greater Manchester. So it's the whole of Greater Manchester has been doing public service reform and neighbourhood integration working for quite some time. So we're not trying to reinvent the wheel here, but what we are trying to do is pull together a package, I suppose, of approaches that we know will work with some principles and culture and ways of working. So in effect, what it is it's got some pillars to it where we're trying to look at what we're calling it is live well. So the grand title is live well, and that live well is about everyday support in all of our neighbourhoods, and whether that's trying to get adults into good work, less in crisis, the ones who are less inactive and less with poor health. It's actually supporting children who are living in poverty. It's about having safe and stronger communities. It's about having that prevention and reducing the pressure both on the NHS and local government finances and the rest of the public sector. So I suppose a way to sort of put that into action about what will that look like, what you're talking about. It's going to be really using our existing spaces. So whether that's a GP, a community centre, a family hub, to really have that holistic offer around housing, food, benefits advice, digital inclusion, debt, financial hardship, those spaces where people can maybe do community-led health, so they can do health checks or whatever those things are. But it's very much community-led. So what we're trying to do is say we can have these network of places and spaces, but it actually needs to be co-designed with the community. It needs to be co-located with community, and it needs to be communities who are actually providing a lot of the services. So that will take us being brave as the public sector to shift, our commissioning, our resources, and a lot of the work that we do into the community sector. So it's that bottom-up approach. And really then trying to find the pathways. And I think what's perhaps different that in some of this work is within the Live Well Prevention Demonstrator, we've got a £10 million pot released to work with Department of Work and Pensions to really help, those people who, aren't near to work and who are unable to work or because of health reasons, get them into work, get them into skills. So the in economic activity that we're working on, the £10 million is sort of part of the Live Well work. So what the prevention demonstrator really is an integrated approach to prevention. It gives us massive opportunities to work on. We've got some starting assumptions because we've done lots of this at a neighbourhood level, but we need to build on that and be able to show the metrics, be able to show what we can do, and be able to just be brave really and have a go at it. But certainly from my perspective, one of the things that we've got to do this time round is not do as much to communities. Let them lead the way on this. Let them come forward with solutions. Certainly within Wigan, our experience is that communities know what's best for them. Not necessarily the NHS or the council. So let them lead with some of the solutions rather than the public service.
And it's a fascinating kind of approach, isn't it? And if I sit there listening to you thinking that's a real possible dichotomy, is a real kind of maybe a fault line between a council that could become quite reductionist and saying, I can only do this amount, whereas you're talking about your council being an enabler and supporter of Wigan thriving, whether that's employment, the environment, everything. You're talking about the council, therefore, turning it on its head and saying we are here to support all kinds of things happening, not just my defined area, which must take quite a lot of balance at times as well with for you as officers and with your politicians as well to get that right, because that's an amazing long-term vision, isn't it?
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that actually, Matthew, because we've just spent probably 18 months reflecting on those critical questions about also what is our role as a local authority and where do we see the borough. But we've not done that in isolation. What we've done is we've had 18 months of conversations with the private sector, the business sector, residents, our community sector, the NHS, everybody really. And we've reflected on, so people who know a little bit about Wigan, if you put it into Google, it comes up as the Wigan deal, and it's sort of quite famous in local government land in terms of changing a council's work from being quite paternalistic into much more around a social contract and relationship based. And what we've learned from that is lots of things, but also what we've learned is that we need to come together in a partnership. And what we've done as a place-based strategy is 2 missions. And we've collectively said, actually, as the whole of this borough, if we come together under 2 missions, we can make a massive difference to people's lives here. And those 2 missions are actually, the first mission is actually about inequalities. It's about fairness for families, for children, for our businesses, for our residents. And that's actually facing into the inequalities that people have in their lives. And we know that people do still face massive health inequalities, financial inequalities, social inequalities, environmental inequalities. And what we said is that if we really want to make a difference, we're going to come to collectively on mission 1, and mission 1's around fighting for fairness, really, and doing something about those inequalities. And then our second mission is really making our neighbourhoods thrive. So how can all our neighbourhoods, Wigan, we've got 14 proud towns. It isn't just one big town. There's 14 towns here with all their own identities, their own communities. So how do we get our 14 proud towns to be successful and thrive? That real neighbourhood approach. So we're coming together as a full partnership across the whole of this borough on those 2 missions. And that's different this time. That's collectively saying, I suppose in old-fashioned language, it's a place strategy. And that's what councils are about, really. We're enablers to the whole system to be able to have success for our joint ambitions and our joint challenges, and a recognition that, we can have a massive role, but we can't do it on our own. And having that focus at what we've classed as our new era, progress with unity, is what is our motto around this. And that's what we need to do, and we can only develop those ideas and that creativity and do the work across mission 1 and mission 2 if we do it collectively and we do it together. So we're creating a new movement, a new era, a new movement around progress with unity that will focus, as you say, it's not just about our statutory responsibilities, it's around 2 missions for this place and what matters to the people here.
Brilliant. At the beginning, you said right at the front, my jobs are, I'm Chief Executive Council, but I'm the place-based leader for health and care. So what does that mean? What does that mean in terms of you and your responsibilities? And actually, so when we talk about the NHS being this big thing, this broad thing from primary care all the way through to, hyper intensive acute care. What's the place-based leader do amongst all of that?
Juggle a diary.
Well, that's normal, I guess.
Juggle a diary, and it's become crazy. The NHS is a very different culture than local government, and it's the demands on the diary have become crazy. So, in Greater Manchester, we have I think a slightly different approach built on, again, probably devolution and things that have been things that we believe are right here in Greater Manchester. So when the ICB was set up over 2 years ago now, when CCGs merged into the ICB and we looked at the statutory responsibilities of the ICB, we with intent, really, and with strong purpose, collectively decided that the chief executives of the local authorities would become the place-based leads. And that is the position in Greater Manchester, apart from one area, apart from one locality, which is Bolton, and it's the chief executive, Fiona Nodung, chief executive of the provider trust there, who's the place-based lead. So what that means is that as place-based leads, we work both at a local level and a GM level. So my role at a local level is to work collaboratively with the locality team, so the people who are employed by the ICB. So I, work with that team, who are absolutely amazing. So they're a Wigan team and a GM team. So we have our Wigan hat on and our Greater Manchester hat on. So we have responsibility for lots of different things still at a local level. So although quite a lot of the areas have been what I would class as centralised in old-fashioned language. We still have that local flexibility in terms of our locality team. So my role really is to work with the locality team, with the hospital, with primary care, with the council, with the community sector, and all of those partners under the sort of Healthy Wigan Partnership banner, so under the locality board, to really pull together our priorities at a locality level and how do they fit in then to the sort of GM. And then collectively across Greater Manchester, we work as place-based leads. So the ICB exec team and the place-based leads come together on a 2-weekly basis. There's a lot of pressures, as you know, in the GM system. So we're looking at everything from, finance to performance, and then more importantly, onto the wider determinants of health and population health. So we work strongly as a place-based team. And that doesn't mean to say there's not tensions. It doesn't mean to say there's not issues to deal with. But I think what we're trying to do is really bridge the relationship between local government and the NHS to say we need to come together to be able to, think about the demands on the whole health system, think about the demands on the whole social care system, and we can't do that in isolation. So we're building on what was, really great relationships with the CCG, but trying to take them into a new era of ICBs, and that's been difficult because there's been a lot of change around it, and we're trying to sort of, really sort of rebuild into the new world of ICBs and relationships. But certainly for me at a local level, my part, the partnership and the relationship we have with our hospital couldn't be any stronger, really. We have an amazing relationship with the hospital, with the GPs, with the community sector. We've got a lot to do at a Wigan level. We've got some real issues to resolve in terms of demand pressures on the hospital. But I maybe give you a quick example and then shut up and let you come back on a few things. But we've just come together on a co-investment piece between the ICB, the local the council and the hospital. So we are joint funding a piece of transformation work where I think the majority of the benefits will fall within the NHS, but the local authority wants to be part of it. So what we're trying to do is look at better lives. So how do we get less people tipping up at A&E? How do we get them out of the hospital? How do we, discharge quicker into various settings, but actually then in the middle of the hospital, how do we sort the flow out in the middle of the hospital? So we're sort of looking in the middle and the out and coming at, but most importantly, trying to, prevent people going into hospital. And we've jointly invested, a considerable amount of money into a transformation program to try and get that radical change and support each other as the whole health system. And I think that goes to show the level of collaboration that we've got at a local level.
Yeah, I can see that. And it's interesting when I listen to your words, what really comes across regularly, you've said this at GM level, but you've said it at local level, is trust, relationships, and at the back of that, lots of those is time as well, time to get that right. And my guess is you would never have got that joint transformation approach if you were starting from nowhere. It's built on that pedigree of saying we're interwoven together in Wigan.
Yeah, it's very much that. I mean, I think again, we've been doing our Healthier Wigan partnership for 10 years, really, and we've had that history of trust and relationships. It's been a bit bumpy, if I'm honest, Matthew. It hasn't always been, there has been occasions where I think the system can drive us to be divisive, if I'm allowed to be quite candid. So Mary, who's the chief exec at the hospital here at our trust, we purposely say to each other, we're not going to get drawn into this divisive system, the system that can make us divisive, because I'm pulled into, conversations about our UEC performance. And you can get into a blame culture between, if you want to go into no right to reside figures and all of the targets that the NHS is driven to. And it's not the right thing to do, and you can end up blaming each other for some of the issues. And we try and step away from that and say, if we go down that path, we'll destroy the trust and relationships we build up. So collectively, we come together to resolve. And it's holding true to that, even when the system is actually putting that many demand pressures on you. It sort of drives you to be divisive, and so yeah, it is hard. It is really, really hard. But we very much stick to our values and behaviours, particularly from the council perspective. So they are be positive, be accountable, be courageous and be kind. So everything that we try to do in terms of leadership is around those behaviours: positive, accountability, being courageous and being kind. And that means that you do have lots of demands, lots of responsibilities, but you do it in line with those values and behaviours. And I'm a strong advocate for compassion and kindness in leadership. So, Mary and I, if I look at that relationship with the, with the hospital, we have to stick together and resolve issues together, even though sometimes the system is trying to drive us to do something differently.
And it's very interesting that you said that underpins, those values underpin it, because I'm with you. I'm a great believer that actually if you have your values and behaviour aligned to, therefore, how you operate and your priorities, those become very hard things. They're not fluffy things. People talk about values as if they're nice ethereal things, but they're not. They're like, no, we are operating in this way and we choose to operate in this way. We're not going to operate that way. And getting that alignment is really important, isn't it? To say that's what we do as leaders.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, Matthew, for Wigan, we've had those behaviours for a long, long time. We talk about them daily. We recruit on them. We think about retention in line with them. They are part of our, we don't have a traditional performance culture. We're based on objectives. We actually talk about how that person is based on those behaviours, how they are working in line with those behaviours. And, most people who work in the public sector are intrinsically motivated. They want to do the right thing for residents or the right things for patients, wherever you are. And, there's massive challenges for people working in the public sector in terms of stress and pressure, isn't there? But actually, talking about values and behaviours is really important. Being dedicated public servants is really important. And for me, given what, we've been through, as a country, worldwide, actually compassion in leadership and kindness in leadership is so important. And having that visibility to really talk about values and behaviours and be true to them, that compassionate care. And if you think about the join up between local authorities and the NHS, actually compassionate care and compassionate leadership is so important, not just in terms of outcomes for patients and residents, but actually for our staff, for their well-being, for their motivation, and really important for making sure that you tackle any issues around bullying or harassment. Very personally important to me that I lead with those values and behaviours, and we see them in the organisation. It tells you so much about an organisation. I think when you go in an organisation, you can touch the values and behaviours. And I hope that if you came into this council, and you came to Wigan, really, you'd touch kindness, you'd touch strength of relationships, you'd touch that compassion and, that empathy and listening to people. Because that's what people want, isn't it? We're all humans at the end of the day, and absolutely. It's important to me. I'd read, Matthew, that Michael's West piece of work on health leadership, where he talks about, you've probably read it yourself, but that compassionate leadership. I think he says results in more engaged and motivated staff and actually higher levels of well-being, and ultimately what you get is higher levels of care. So higher levels of compassion with your patient or with your resident or with your, with the person that you are working alongside. So I think it's vital for sustainability and effectiveness in all our organisations.
Yeah, and Michael was very kind to do one of the podcasts with me in series 1, and it's very interesting. Which clearly chimes with you as a council leader. He does absolutely say, a compassionate, empathetic, kind, values-driven approach yields to better psychological safety, better teams functioning, better outcomes. And I think, which is really important for this modern day, more productivity and greater efficient ways of working. And I think we forget that at our peril, because there's a clear link between those things. Yet we don't talk about that enough, do we? We just kind of say productive inputs. Actually, the productivity is the outputs. The inputs is actually having a great leadership approach, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm really glad you mentioned that, Matthew, around psychological safety. It's been another personal passion of mine. I talk about it openly here at the council. I had been trying to create, for the last 5 years since I became chief executive, a real sense of psychological safety. That you can come to work and be who you are, that it's okay to be that, we're not asking you to be anything other than who you are, and that you can safely challenge your colleagues, that we will listen to each other deeply, that different opinions matter, that actually having different opinions is so important that, I mean, particularly for a leadership team, isn't it, that you don't have groupthink. So let's bring a diverse range of views in. So it's particularly important for me when we're dealing with transformational work and radical work. And, you know, you said, Matthew, at the outset about the challenges on our budgets and the demand pressures. If you can't have psychological safety in an organisation, and you can't be honest with each other about what's working, what isn't working, and where colleagues don't have the safety to be able to speak honestly, then you're never going to get to be able to do that radical transformation. And I am entirely comfortable with talking about it constantly and bringing that sort of authenticity and that honesty, because I just think it strengthens relationships when you can have that level of psychological safety. And, you know, I truly believe it. Yeah. I did my master's in it years and years ago around that relationship with the sort of people in an organisation and the sense of that psychological contract. And it fascinated me then many years ago. So it must be something that's stuck with me ever since.
And I was going to ask you that as we move into the end of our discussion, although I could carry on talking to you for hours, Alison, because it's fascinating to listen to your perspective. But how have you developed that leadership approach that you're describing? Because you're talking about changing a culture, you're talking about living a different culture as a council, you're talking about a different function for the council with partners, and lots of that revolves around you and your impact on your elected members, etc. So you said you did your masters, but how have you learned, and what's influenced you as a leader to have that mindset?
Wow, I'm not sure I've actually been asked that.
I always have this response to people when I ask people to how they do it. It's kind of, well, it's kind of what I do, isn't it?
I'm not quite sure, actually. Yeah, wow. I had 20 years in the civil service before this, so I'm thinking, I wonder what sort of was informing my thoughts then. But you know, I think actually, I spent quite some time doing organisational development, and I think part of it comes from a sense of how important that is. So I did my CIPD qualifications and, you know, became a fellow, all of that sort of stuff as you do. But I think that interest in organisational psychology and organisational development probably was the sort of start of understanding some of this and understanding the impact and how organisations work in particular. I think then from a personal point of view, just a sense of humanity and compassion probably comes from who you are as a person, isn't it? If you look at your preferred learning styles or your preferred sort of ways of working, I'm sort of very much relationship and people based, sort of less processy and bureaucratic. So I think some of it comes within you as a person, doesn't it? And then some of it's been built through watching other amazing things happen, and particularly in Wigan. One of the things that we did, Matthew, again, 10 years ago really, was asset-based working. And if you look at the concepts of asset-based working, they are amazing really, aren't they? Because they link back to anthropology and ethnographics, and it's actually about seeing humans as humans. And what that's come into now, and what I truly believe in, is the values that I talked about, but also our ways of working. And two big things. We've got 6 ways of working in Wigan under our new era, but 2 of them are massively important to me. And the first one is see the person. And that comes through, I think, for me as a leader. So you take a person-centred approach to your leadership, or you take a person-centred approach to public services, you take a person-centred approach to everything. And that is putting people at the heart of every conversation that you have and responding to their strengths and recognising their assets as an individual. So I think that's massive to me. And then the second thing that's massive to me is listening deeply. Sort of I think about it from a leadership point of view. It's quite hard, isn't it, to listen deeply? It takes intent to listen deeply. It takes time and it takes conversations. And then if you put it into a public sector ethos, listening deeply to communities, patients, residents, whoever that is, and recognising that actually the patient or the resident or that community group, they know what matters to them. They often know what's best, and we need to listen to them deeply. So I think, that sense of those things are really important to me. And it comes from probably those three things: where I am as a person, my experience from many, many years ago, and then what I've learned through working in the sector and those strengths-based approaches. That's probably where I see things in the world.
Yeah, really interesting. And again, just to reference Michael West again, it's not that we're pushing him as the only person in this space, but he also talks about being present and listening with fascination, doesn't he? And that's that whole point, is that you've got to engage with people properly, not in a superficial level, which is coming across in droves in terms of what you talked about. Well, Alison, lastly then, what are you looking forward to? You sound like you've got keeps on. There's the new government. You've got all those great developments happening in Wigan. You've got, as you described, the most challenging kind of diary, because you're straddling the health and local government world. But what as we go into the new year, what are you looking forward to as a leader?
I'm looking forward
Apart from a time off, maybe.
I am really excited about 2025. We've had an amazing 2024. We've had so many challenges, but for 2025, I am absolutely excited. A few reasons. I think the work that we're doing with the NHS at a local level here is going to really take a turn for positivity, if that's the right way to describe it, in 2025. We are really getting ahead of the work that we're doing on the Better Lives programme. And what I want to see happen at the end of that is that we look after people more in their communities. We have less people ending up at A&E. We're working collectively together as a system to keep people at home, to keep people, in their home settings, whatever that is, to keep people away from hospital, to work great with the hospital, and to have that Better Lives programme, which I think will make a massive difference. Most importantly to the people, but obviously to the hospital and the council and other services. So I think we'll see some radical change there. And the relationships, as I say, are built on strong foundations. From a council perspective, I'm really looking forward to getting into having a go at really making a difference on these missions. So one of the big things that we'll be doing is neighbourhood working. So we're having a real good go at completely rethinking with our communities what true neighbourhood working is. So for Wigan, that's going to be massive and amazing, but also then for the prevention demonstrator under Live Well for Greater Manchester. So how do we do that at Greater Manchester level? And obviously my Wigan perspective. So making a real difference in our communities on neighbourhood working. And then ultimately, working on those missions for inequality. So that's linking what we're doing on growth, what we're doing on regeneration, what we're doing on health and well-being, and putting the jigsaw together. Immediately in January, I have a local government peer review. So I have a team of, I think about 8 or 9 people coming here, politicians and senior leaders coming to have a look at us. So I've got a week of people coming in. I am really looking forward to that. So we are a learning organisation and a place that likes to learn. So I'm hoping they will come along and tell us lots of positives, but also tell us things that we need to do differently or get stronger on. And I'm looking forward to that learning. And I'm looking forward then to listening to those colleagues, taking on board their reflections and doing something about it. So an amazing year. And Matthew, we have no elections. So after doing 3 elections last year as the returning officer, I have got no elections next year. So it means we've got a good run at doing lots of exciting things without any, well, obviously I work in a political organisation, but I said without any of the politics, but it's politics every day when you're a local government chief exec. So yeah,
for those listening to this, you will not be able to see what I can see, which is the biggest smile on Alison's face when she said she has no elections this year, which is clearly is important. Well, Alison, it's been an absolute honour to listen to you, listening about how your council, Wigan Council, makes a difference to 345,000 residents, that kind of deep GM and local kind of leadership, your place, your role in the place-based leadership, how your prevention demonstrator is making a massive difference. You're delivering on your missions, and then you strap passion about making authentic leadership, psychologically safe staff, support to local residents. And I think what comes through is that work to actually empower communities, people that know the best, that actually, when you say you're looking forward to 2025, to next year, 2025, it will be based on all of those things coming to fruition. Alison, an observation from me, I've done lots of these discussions on my podcast. If you hadn't been mentioned in local government all the way through, you could easily be some of the best people I've interviewed from the NHS. It was just absolutely fascinating. The same dynamics of support, passion, public service and servant leadership was chiming through. So thank you for joining the podcast. It's been fascinating, and we look forward to see the outcomes of your LGA peer and review and a great 2025. Alison, thank you so much.
that's great, Matthew. Thank you so much. It's been lovely to join you. And take care, and thank you.